it's the first stage. And you're almost like learning how to stay balanced in those positions and how to adjust the stuff you learned on the ground and how to apply all those movements onto obstacles. And then maybe another level is where you can skate the obstacle in a way that it's calling for. Let's say if you have a certain bank, just jumping up a bank or over the bank, it's not really using the bank.
It's definitely a back and forth with whether I let the terrain decide what tricks I want to do or whether I have tricks planned in my mind beforehand. I think that the obstacle, the terrain, the object should really define what the trick is on that particular space or that particular obstacle or environment. Rather than the best trick you can do there is more like what you think that your skill set or you being on rollerblades makes most sense in that environment. For me personally, it feels like there is a correct answer and I did what that spot was asking me to do. I don't mean it in that like really deep way, like the spot's talking to me, because it's definitely, that's not how I feel. But like sometimes you just feel like you can go away and you feel satisfied with what you've done.
I don't come to places often with a specific trick in mind. I find that in a certain sense, it's somewhat uncreative for me, at least it feels that way, to already have an idea for a certain spot before I know what it feels like to skate that spot. But there are occasions where you show up to something that is initially, this is so skatable. This looks really like there's so many things that can be done here. And in some cases, the terrain or the spot can have very specific ideas jump out at you, just given what it is. If it's something, it's like, oh, you can start there and then grind from A to B, or oh, you can drop in on this thing. And sometimes the things that jump out at a spot and the ideas that seem obvious are the things I want to avoid in some way. I don't love just showing up to a spot that presents an obvious way of being skated. And then I'm like, okay, so I come to the spot. I understand that you can roll in, you can approach it this way, do the trick on the thing and exit this way. And all I need to do is pick a trick out of my vocabulary and do it. And then I've got a trick. And that to me is like, I really don't get much pleasure in that experience. There's nothing creative really about that process. And there's always sort of unexpected elements of when you're filming a trick. You think you're doing something that's really straightforward within your repertoire and within your ability, but then the surface doesn't roll how you thought it would, or there's more friction to something. The approach makes it difficult to get the speed or something like that. But I don't really think of those things as requiring much kind of like creative energy to solve those things. The other aspect of skating certain terrain is you might be with other people, right? And we're always going to be influenced by what other people are doing on a spot. And that can mean that the influence is everyone is kind of sessioning something and they're sort of skating it in a similar direction. And maybe they influence you to do the same thing. But you can also be influenced to be like, okay, that's not what I'm going to do then. If everyone's first instinct was to like start trying these kinds of movements and skating at this thing in a certain direction, there has to be something else here that you could do that would be more deceitful. Skaters who really let the terrain dictate their moves can be really productive. They can execute a lot of ideas because there's no like willingness to challenge those like initial ideas that jump off the page. And if you're not challenging that stuff, it's like, cool, I'm going to jump on and slide down and roll away. And I'm just going to pick a trick out of my vocabulary and do it. Or I'm going to do a bunch of different things on it and then see how that feels. And then decide if I can pick something from my vocabulary and do it. And it's like, it's not very creative process, but it's more productive, I think. I think it's more straightforward. Some people get a lot of fulfillment out of doing that, out of like not really worrying about doing something too creative. And I do observe that as being a more productive way of skating in terms of getting footage, getting clips, filming tricks. It's like, if I don't worry too much about the creative process, more can happen. I can film more in a shorter time period. Whether I'm fulfilled by doing that or not is kind of the question. And I would be someone that's not very fulfilled by that formula. Sometimes I am, but typically I would rather like show up to the spot, and I don't want to like spend an hour there and come away with 2 to 3 clips that were filmed. I would rather spend the whole hour like figuring out one thing that it involves kind of more thinking and more messing around and more frustration in some cases. I think that sometimes, for example, when I skate with Leon, we show up to a spot together with this sort of premise of like, we can film each other here. We can each do something here. And maybe Leon has like already been to this spot. So he's already got some ideas in the tank and like, he's ready to go. And with me, I'm like, I might put my skates on, start skating it, be like, this is too obvious. This is like, yeah, I don't know what to do here. Yes, I could just film that, but that doesn't feel very interesting or satisfying. And like, oh, I'm not going to be able to film anything at this spot. It's not really speaking to me. And then maybe I film Leon do something for half an hour, 45 minutes. And then I start looking at it again for myself, and I start skating it. And then something might come up and be like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I think I have an idea here. And that kind of moment of feeling like hopeless for a while and just feeling bad about yourself and feeling uncreative and uninspired, but then having that sudden moment, that sudden spark of like, wait a sec, there is something that can be done at this spot. Like, that is one of the most fulfilling things in the process of skating, and like in the process of finding spots and skating spots, I think. Yeah, there's this kind of internal dialogue of, I don't want to let this spot force me to film something really obvious.
I suppose, you have to have input in what places you decide to stop and skate. And there's definitely an unconscious criteria that I have for places I like to stop and skate around, whether it's to try to film something or not. I do like to treat spots as a puzzle sometimes. Sometimes I don't think every puzzle is worth solving, but if I find a puzzle that I think is worth solving, I enjoy as much as I find it frustrating sometimes and can almost give up before I figure it out. The sort of sensation of being at a puzzle and playing around and really thinking that you're not going to solve it, and then a few minutes later you do solve it. That's one of my favorite dopamine hits that I get from skating. And that's more or less how I treat my approach to spots.
The trick is adjusted and determined by the terrain, but also the terrain determines the trick. It's mutual, and also what's imagined in advance and then documented and written down is nearly always changed to something at least a little bit different than what you had imagined for so many different reasons. A lot of times you don't accurately determine your true ability. I think it's important to understand your true ability as opposed to just an imaginary ability. There can be huge disparities. And then when you're actually doing the trick, it may need to get modified. Or you may realize that the location that you're at provides for something much more profound as you're there, and the trick would need to be adjusted. It's an absolute fluid process that needs to be changed on the spot.
When you figure out that perfect movement that falls perfectly in line with like the structure that you're faced with, and you can utilize that surface or that slope or the wall or the stair, if you can utilize that in just the way that it was unintentionally designed to do, it's like putting the final piece of a puzzle into place and like scratching the itch of satisfaction. Yeah, it's an amazing feeling when you figure out the perfect movement for the perfect spot, and you can marry those two ideas.
You'd have to be observant enough of your environment to recognize unique architecture and then understand what's unique about it and how you can move through that space in harmony, maybe. What will complement the curvature of that spot, the slopes of that spot. And then another level of that is the equipment. If you're using the bank and you're trying to stay on the bank and balance rolling on it on edge, but you have an aggressive skate, you won't be able to stay on that edge as long as you could if you had, let's say, a longer frame or taller wheels so you can get deeper. I guess that's like the holy grail, when the skater can find a spot that's unique and have the equipment that will be the best tool for this job. And then on top of that, have a camera person that can communicate it all. That makes the trick unlike any trick ever done, literally. On flat ground, it's really hard to do something that no one has ever done before. It feels like, for me as a skater, when I find the spot and I have the right idea and I have the skills that I developed on flat ground to implement here and use some of those principles of wizard style, and the spot looks right and the camera person knows how to film it, that's great. And I think in the earlier days, we were like, oh, we have big wheels, we can go fast. Oh, we have big wheels, we can roll over things. And you slowly start realizing more and more, wow, like I'm taller off the ground so I can stay deeper on edge. And yes, it's a mix of the equipment, the ideas, the filming. The filming is a whole other kind of category. You don't have to film, but it feels exponential if you can also film it. It's almost like you can do the trick. It's not the same as if you can teach the trick. If you can teach the trick, you understand it to a much higher degree.